Welcome everybody to the Creators Table podcast. Today I have with me Eno. Why don't you introduce yourself to the people listening? Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
So hi guys, I'm Eno. I do a lot. I like to explore with a lot of different types of 3D mediums. So anything from textiles to clay to baking and decorating. I just am an explorer. I like to create in every form possible.
Okay, so you're not like so there might be the things that you do that you like publish and like people see, but there's a lot other things you do creatively, right?
Yeah, precisely. This is the issue. I have so many things going on and I make so many different types of things that I'm
Yeah,
not quite sure when I'm at the point I'm ready to share in each medium. Um,
yeah.
so yeah,
You're kind of exploring every all the outlets that you're using, and then just like the ones that you're the most like confident in, you kind of highlight those.
precisely.
Yeah, I would say I would say I relate to that for sure. I mean, there's things like I've tried, but nobody's necessarily like seen, right? Like
Mm,
that's kind of me with playing guitar. Like I don't post really any of that stuff because I'm not as confident in
mm,
that as I am other things. But
mm.
um, so how long have you been? This is probably going to be a hard question for you, but how
Yeah.
long have you been kind of looking at these creative outlets?
I would say about 4 years. I would say around COVID is when I really started trying to explore myself creatively because
Hmm.
I was very much a technical science I was very technical minded growing up.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
didn't really like consider creativity, at least visual creativity, in any way till COVID. And then I was stuck at home with nothing to do. And then I really started to explore other ways to create or to mentally, like, I don't know, stimulate myself mentally, I guess.
Yeah, of course. I That's another person who said COVID was like a turning point. I've had two
Yeah.
people say that, which is very I don't know, like okay, so I was homeschooled growing up, so I was at home a lot already
Right.
growing up. So like I was already I think being at home for a lot of people in our generation like a lot, like and not just
Mm,
like the summer, but
mm,
was really big for a lot of people, and I think it
yeah.
really like inspired a lot of people. And it kind of makes you like not saying everybody should be homeschooled, of course not, but it makes
Yeah.
you wonder like how valuable that time at home really is, because a
Right.
lot of people want to be like, oh, kids need to be out of the house, which I agree. Like I there were times where I just needed to leave the house, and there were times that I had other things in my life that I did that were helpful, but it's like COVID
Mm,
was like everybody's little taste of being homeschooled. Kind of little
yeah.
just a little taste of it, you know. Not really, but kinda. And
Yeah.
not saying everybody liked that. I know a lot of people hated it. I know even though like life wasn't extremely different for me, but it was in some senses, just not in the school
Yeah.
sense. I know some people miss school a lot, but um, what would you say your first project you ever like? I'm trying to figure out the best way because this might be hard for you to answer. But if there is like a project you started with that like your first project that you would say was your first like great project, what would that project have been?
First great project. I would actually say it was a furniture design thing. I This is more school related, so not very personal.
Uh,
But I had a class called Design and Technology, and we were supposed to, well, design something and build it from scratch.
yeah.
And so I made this massive like dresser. I don't know what people call it, but it was like stuck on the wall, and it was made out of wood and
Mm,
acrylic, and it was like this really massive, really like intricate thing. And it was my first time working with wood outside of like
uh,
constant supervision. So I would say the first time I was able to make something massive that I had full creative control over. Um,
so it was like
yeah,
it wasn't. I thought you said so it was like an actual. like you said, cabinet. So it wasn't like just like the photo of the design. It was like
No, it
you
was like
actually
an
made.
actual thing. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah, that's really cool. Do you still have it?
Um, I don't. I think I left it. Okay, so I went to school in Kenya, for
Hmm.
like high school. And so it was so big I couldn't travel with it. So I think I just left it at my school.
Hmm.
So it's
Oh
somewhere
wow.
there. It's in like the studio workshop or something, and it's being used as storage. But it's still there. Like it still works.
You gotta go check that out at some point. You
I
gotta go
do,
reclaim
yeah.
it. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those things when you kind of sell your art or anything like that. It's kind of bittersweet, because it's like, well, you didn't sell it, but you don't have it anymore. Like, there's things I made
Yeah.
that I sold, and I'm like, I kind of wish I kept that. But at the end of the day, I'm also like totally content with the fact that I don't have it anymore,
Mm,
just because like I can just appreciate it for what it is, and like
yeah.
I don't necessarily need to have it in my hands to really like still appreciate that I did that.
Yeah. For me, it's like a thing of pride. It's like I did that.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah, you should be proud. It's
Yeah.
not gonna lie, like making like you said it was like a cabinet, right? Like a
Right.
dresser maybe.
Yeah.
Um, but like those kind of things aren't like I don't know, those are like for my family at least, those pieces like that are like heirlooms. Like those get
Mhm.
passed down. So
Yeah.
you really think about it, that dresser or cabinet, whichever, it could be passed down for like who knows, like for generations. Like I know my mom's like china cabinet is like super old, but it's also
Yeah.
super nice.
Yeah.
So that's a cool thing to think about.
Yeah.
Would you say what is your most recent project that you've worked on?
My most recent project was actually not really a piece, but kind of like a quote unquote the beginning of a legacy.
Mhm,
So because I experiment with so many different types of media, I think,
mhm,
um, it's really hard for me to keep track, like was said earlier. And so it's basically I just started like an online or a digital space to show everything I work on, whether it's like good or bad or whatnot. And so just that space existing, I consider a project. And so far my favorite. So this is like from my digital things. So the short films I make or the little videos I make, all the way till my baking and my baking progress and like my decoration progress,
mhm.
um, exploring textiles. So it's basically just like a digital dump for everything I've ever tried to do.
Gotcha. Is this like a I could be reading this wrong. Is this like a website or is this like your Instagram or
There's an Instagram. There's also a website, but it's not on the Instagram right now.
Okay. See, what's
Yeah.
cool, I that's one thing that I feel like is it's really cool that you highlight because I feel um like I would say, and I say this with a grain of salt, I would say like uh content creators are like artistic people. Um
Mm,
and that's maybe where you're getting, like you kind of said, you kind of uh are have your hands in multiple different pots of creativity, and maybe you have it a little bit there. And because I feel like sometimes like when I'm editing my videos or anything like that, like I
right.
feel like I enjoy doing it. It's not just
Yeah.
something where I'm just like, sitting down on the computer like, oh, I hate this.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I feel the same way when I'm editing videos. And
Yeah.
I do really like posting this stuff, not just because I feel like I need to or that it needs to be highlighted. It's just
Right.
something I enjoy doing. And would you say you kind of feel that way?
I 1000% agree. Like, and I never hear people really giving like content creators, and I say content creators like very widely because obviously there are different types of like digital content creation,
Mhm,
but just the act of editing your videos, choosing the fonts you want to go on it, the transitions or the lack thereof, the timing, the frames,
mhm.
everything is such an art. But because like it's all behind the scenes, people never really think of it as a form of art. And I think it's
Yeah.
very important. But like you said, it's also very enjoyable. Like, obviously, if I want to share what I made and I've taken footage of it, I need to edit the footage. But then
Yeah,
again, that's a form of expression. How do I edit my videos?
yeah,
You know? So, yeah.
yeah. Exactly. I think it's like, uh, it's it's fun. It's fun being a content creator and also just making stuff. It can
Yeah.
be a lot because especially what you're doing. If you're somebody, if what you're doing takes months and months of work and so much time put in towards whatever you're making, then you
Mm.
might not be making as many videos. But if you're trying to be a consistent creator, you have to figure out ways to keep posting.
Right, right, right. It's very
Because I mean,
important. Like you said, it's hard.
yeah, yeah, and I mean, what's really cool about this is we have all of these. We're kind of at this peak point where there are so many different social media platforms where
Mm.
you can make a lot of money by just posting.
Right.
I'm not saying that's the only reason you would post, but it certainly is uh, something that I see as like that's a possibility. Like if I
Yeah.
get to do this and make money off of it, then why not?
Yeah.
Like if
Yeah.
I can make a living making rugs and guitars and posting podcast videos, then that's the dream.
I will, in fact. Yeah.
It's like I don't think there's a single other person who would say that wouldn't be a
Yeah.
great gig.
Precisely. Yeah, I feel like it's social media in all of its forms has really helped artists, especially because we
Hmm.
all are like so aware of like the whole starving artist trope. Like,
Yeah,
once you're an
yeah,
artist, unless you're employed, which is extremely hard to do, it's extremely hard to live. But like
yeah.
social media has given artists who really, really, really don't want to go into like the traditional 9 to 5 route,
Mhm,
like a space to make their own money, to make their own living, but while also almost completely enjoying what they do. And obviously, just like any other job, it's hard to maintain. It's hard to like post consistently. It's hard to always find like motivation to create.
mhm.
Um, but it's now a possibility, even more than before. So I feel like it's a really good thing.
Yeah, yeah. It is a good thing. It's very good that we're able to highlight artists, even though a lot of the times they're not highlighted to the extent that they should be on these social
Mm.
media platforms. At least they have that opportunity now, whereas before, I really can't think of a world of being an artist and not having social media to share it. I really can't.
Right.
I really can't think of that because it's like, how else do you find out about it? I mean, you got to go
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
galleries, and I mean, how many people are really going to galleries? I mean, not the amount
Yeah.
of people that are scrolling Instagram every day. That's for sure.
Precisely. Yeah.
Well, why don't I ask you? So you said so what is it? You said you bake. What is it exactly that you bake?
Honestly, everything that I
Mhm,
can.
mhm.
Um,
I gotcha. I gotcha.
recently at home, it's been like cakes. So that's like because it's the best way to practice decorating.
Hmm.
And I started a little business where I sell cakes and cupcakes and buns and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I started in high school because I went to boarding school. I've been in boarding school for like 7 years. And
Oh,
so
wow.
I had a lot of time on my hands and a free
Hmm.
kitchen that nobody else used to like
Yeah.
try so many different things.
So would you say baking is definitely one of your main passions?
1000%. It's been really
Yeah.
hard, like since college, because we don't have kitchens. Um,
Oh,
so yeah, it's quite sad. And
I
so
guess it's
I've like,
technically. Go ahead.
no, 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 that's it. Yeah.
Well, I guess it's one of those things where trying to figure out the best way to say this. Baking probably isn't one of those things that people regularly um, consider art or a
Mm,
creative outlet, which not because that it isn't, but it's just people don't associate those two things together. But I would say they definitely are, and
mm.
and maybe it's also just the fact that there's two different schools. There's art school, and then there's culinary school.
Yeah,
So maybe they're like go to culinary school then. I think
precisely. Yeah.
SCAD I think SCAD definitely should get some kitchens for you guys.
Yeah, we should get some kitchens in there. Um, They try. I mean, they do try, but we live and we learn.
So, well, since we kind of brought up SCAD a little bit, what's your major at SCAD?
So my major is industrial design. It was a struggle to pick it, but I'm there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So why that major? Is there any particular reason?
I really wanted a major that gave me flexibility with creation.
Mm,
And not that other majors don't. Like, let's be extremely clear, a lot of them do. It's
mm,
just that I felt like in many other ways it was quite restrictive. Like if I, for example, I had an option, like one of my options were fashion. That would have been extremely fun to explore. But then again, it is fashion. So you
yeah.
spend so much of your time looking at textiles and making them wearable. When I, in my personal creation, tried to do as many things wearable, edible, just there for like decoration purposes. And I feel
Mm,
like industrial design, especially at SCAD, gives me that opportunity, especially when I'm an upperclassman.
yeah, yeah. Of course. I've interviewed a couple people from SCAD. Those episodes haven't come out yet. So this, I believe you're like my last person from SCAD, but I'd love to have more of them because they've been really good to interview.
Mm.
But cool. I have another question, and I keep saying I'm like an advertisement for SCAD at this point because every person I have on this podcast is just the biggest SCAD advocate ever. Um,
Yes.
and I'm like, I've never even heard people talk about college this way. Never. So they're doing something right there. Um,
Yeah.
but what would you say? So you're from where are you from again?
So I'm Nigerian American. So I live
Okay.
partially in Nigeria, but then the US as well.
Gotcha, gotcha. So how did you find out about SCAD?
Um, so this is not necessarily to be an advocate for my high school either.
Mm,
Keep that in mind. But I
okay.
went to UWC, so it's like a global college type thing.
Mm,
But for your last years of high school. And they have a partnership with 100 schools where they give you some sort of scholarship depending on the school you go to, if it's on that list. And
mm-hmm.
SCAD is one of the few arts and design universities on there.
Oh,
And it's also in my home state of Georgia. Yay. And so I
cool,
was like,
cool.
yeah, that's like perfect. And so,
Yeah. Okay. So you live. So Georgia is so Georgia's not completely unfamiliar for you then.
no, 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 no. I'm
Okay.
born there, kind of raised there. And now I go to school there,
Gotcha. Cool. Do you go to the Sky campus or like the Savannah campus or the Atlanta campus?
Savannah. And I
Savannah.
would 1000% recommend that one too.
Yeah, I think everybody else said they would recommend the Savannah campus. So
Yeah,
that again seems like they're doing something right. Would you say that? And what are you a sophomore, junior, freshman?
freshman.
Freshman. Oh, wow, so this is like your first year then.
Hmm.
Wow. Okay. Are you liking it?
I'm loving it. I feel like it's such, again, SCAD advertisement, but it's such a lovely campus. They've created such a safe space for the students. The
Hmm.
classes are good, professors tend to be. So far so good.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really awesome. I haven't known very many. Well, now I know four people who go to SCAD
Oh.
from my previous zero. So
Oh.
it's kind of one of those things. I'm in North Georgia, so I don't really.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't. There's the Atlanta campus, but the Atlanta campus is kind of spread out. Like I feel like it's not very established.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas like I'm sure in Savannah, at least from what I've heard, it has its own area.
Yeah, they've like planted themselves into Savannah. Like there is like they're so intertwined at this point. It's hard to
Yeah,
tell which.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. Yeah, because I've walked through Savannah long time ago now. But last time I went to Savannah, we it was I don't remember really noticing stuff from Scab, but I was also probably like 9 years old.
Right.
So I probably didn't even pay attention to that anyways. I don't know. It kind of, I wonder if it's reminds me a lot of like St. Augustine. They have I have relatives who live down there, but they
Mm.
have a school called Flagler that's right in like the center of the downtown. And they have all these
Mm.
like old buildings and it's just really pretty. I'm
Right.
sure SCAD's very similar.
I would say so myself, yeah.
Um, Let me think. So you said you've also done short films. Can you tell me a little bit
Right.
about that?
So I like videos as well.
Hmm.
Um, and so at first it was just little like documenting places I'd been, and trying to make them pretty. But then I had an art project I had to do like one time, like 2, 3 years ago.
Mm.
And I was running out of experiment, like we're supposed to experiment with like 4 different types of mediums or media.
Yeah.
When I was running out. And so I was like, I'm gonna make a short film. Um,
Mm.
and it was really fun. I filmed it in one day with 2 people in the year below me at my school, and we were running around barefoot, and it was raining, and it was so fun.
Oh,
And I just decided to make more afterwards.
okay, cool. Do you have like a favorite short film of yours that you want to share?
Um, do I? I would say it was the first one I made. Yeah.
Mm.
I think it's called something short. I know, very
Wow, there you go. Yeah.
creative name. I know. Um,
Sounds
but
like a
yeah,
starter, that's for sure.
yeah, it was lovely. I mean, obviously at this point it was my very first one, and so my color grading was awful, timing awful, the camera not great. But it was such a great experience. And most of the films I've only made like 3 or 4 so far. So
Mm.
yes, but they're inspired by songs or poems that I've either read or like heard and really loved. And so it was fun to make. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, my I've had a couple people who make short films on the podcast now, and
Mm.
it's been really cool to visual storytelling is very interesting to me because look, I'm not a big reader, and that's
Yeah.
not because I think books are like bad. I think that'd be a crazy thing to say. But mainly just I just when I can see something visual, like I'm a picture book fanatic. Okay,
You're so
that
right.
is, and I mean I know that's very 5-year-old esque for me to say, um, but I'm sorry, like it's
You're
just hard for me to look
good.
at words and to like it's difficult for me to like stay focused on something like that, and that's just a problem I've always had. But when it
Mm,
comes to like visual art with the storytelling,
mm,
I really enjoy movies. That's something my family really enjoys movies. My parents made sure to share with me as many films from their childhood as they could, and then of course I have
mm.
shows and movies from my childhood, of course, that I love. So that brings my question. So is there like a favorite film that you have?
It's really hard for me to pick, because like similar to you, I love movies and I love films.
Mm,
And so I watch a lot of them. And I
yeah.
have watched a lot of them, and I'm planning hopefully to watch a lot more. And
Mhm,
so it was the same thing with my dad when we were growing up, showing me all his like, I don't know if they're favorites or like most memorable movies from his childhood as well.
mm,
And so in my head, I have this arsenal of especially like the, I don't know, 60s, 70s, 80s, all these musicals and whatnot. And especially the early 1900s as well. So like things with
mm,
like My Fair Lady, these really
yeah,
lovely musicals. So I would
mm.
say I really don't think I have a favorite movie or a favorite film.
There you go. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like that's a very common answer because I feel like it is very difficult to decide. Like if you asked me, to be
Mm.
fair, if you asked me that question, I would say I don't really know, or I'd give you
Yeah.
just the first one that came to the top of my head, which would probably be a weird answer. Like I always like my used to go to movie that I tell people was my favorite was Back to the Future.
Oh,
Um,
real.
and do I really? Is it really my favorite movie? Probably not. But it's just a good movie, and I feel like it. Uh, Maybe that movie inspired me a little bit. So again, probably not my
Mm,
favorite movie or the best movie that I've seen, but you know.
good movie.
I will say though, I recently my buddy got me to watch Whiplash, and that's a great
Such a
movie.
good one. It
Yeah,
is so good. So
yeah.
emotional. So lovely.
I was in my bed at probably like 12 o'clock in the morning, watching this movie, and you get to the last scene where he's doing the solo,
Yeah.
and I mean, I was sure I'm just tweaking out. I was like, this is awesome. I was
Yeah.
like, I don't
So
even like
cool.
jazz music that much, you know? Like, it's like any person who is even the slightest bit musically inclined realizes how freaking awesome that was. It was an awesome
Yeah,
scene.
it's so insane. It's so lovely, so well written, so well made.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Let me think. So, are there people in your life or maybe people who inspired you that you would like to share?
Um, I would say both my parents, honestly.
Mm,
My mom was a tailor slash caterer when she was growing up to like help put
mm,
her through university. And so when we were growing up, she would always tell us stories about, like her baking or her cooking or her making shirts or
yeah, yeah.
trousers or blazers. And her fashion sense right now, impeccable. I'm in awe always. And I would say just growing up around her, and she had so much confidence with how she put her outfits together, or her hair, or her jewelry. And
Mm,
that was really inspiring to see. And I would say my dad as well, in that like he really helped us growing up experiment with things. I would say in a lot of ways, my parents are very supportive in that they're like, it doesn't matter what you want to do as long as you do it well. And so if it gets to the point where it's, oh, I want to experiment with every form of art ever, as long as
mm,
you're actually putting time into this experimentation and making something of it,
mhm.
they would support you, especially my dad. Like he looks for every way possible to supplement as well. So I'd say both my parents.
Yeah, that's really a good thing to have. I feel like creative outlets, like whether you're pursuing them for a career or you're just pursuing them
Mm,
for fun, it can be a bit of a struggle to get that support because it just
mm,
depends on your situation and
mm,
what you have going on in your life, especially though if you're trying to pursue it as a lifetime thing,
mm,
because there's the harsh reality with a lot of artistically uh, creative demanding degrees and stuff like that is that
mm.
there's not really a lot of certainty in it.
Right.
There's a lot of possibilities, but the certainties on well, if you'll be successful isn't super isn't super high.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's not to say that you can't, because I think at the end of the day, as long as you work harder than the next person, that you'll always be successful.
Right.
Regardless of your situation, where you're from. Obviously there's things that are going to make things more challenging, but I think anybody's always capable. Um,
Right.
and I think having parents who are going to support you through that as well is extremely important. And I know without that, it would be really it would be a real struggle to stay happy through it all.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, it's extremely important, I think. And I don't know, it's like it's really hard because you spend so much of your life talking about what you do or like around what you do. And so if the people closest to you especially, obviously not exclusively, but especially aren't not on board, but like aren't supportive in any way, it becomes extremely draining, to share what you're doing, to share where
Yeah.
you hope to go because you know nobody's going to support you. So it's extremely important, I think, and I'm very lucky, very privileged to have support, like a support group, at least a family, if nothing else.
Yeah, of course. I heard so you want to start a podcast. What is it like about? Tell me a little bit about this podcast.
Okay. Um, so my podcast, or what I hope to be one,
Mhm.
is again just like every single time I've tried to do anything. a mixture of a lot of different things. Um, I'm very, I want to say politically inclined,
Mm-hmm.
or at least social politically inclined. And so I really like thinking about people and how they interact, about culture, about society's norms and values and whatnot. And I spend
Yeah.
so much of my time thinking about it, I might as well talk about it. Um,
Mm.
I had
Yeah.
like a list of series like in 2020 when I would do like lives sometimes, like when I was super bored and we're locked at home and I'll just do lives and I'll take questions my friends have asked me, and just talk about them for like an hour.
Yeah.
And it was fun, but it was poorly produced, obviously, because it was just
Yeah.
Instagram. And so I'm trying to do that again, but that
Yeah. I get that. It's kind of one of those things where I think, regardless of what the person's political views are into comparison with mine, I think it's very important because I think opinions and pushing back on anything is extremely important.
mm,
Because I think it's the only way things change is
yeah,
just by pushing back on and 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 that's another thing because I've already mentioned this on the podcast with another guest, but that I'm planning on making a video where I deep dive art and like what can be art. And
right,
this is a weird thing to think about, which when you really think about it, politics is kind of in some ways can be viewed as art in some forms because you're expressing yourself by finding these creative ways of solving problems, you know?
right,
And this can be, for some people, this is their passion. For some people, it's just a job. But for some people, it's their passion, and they really deep dive and think a lot about it. And it affects a lot of people, you know. And people can
right,
see these things and get a certain meaning from it too. So
right.
weird thing to think about. The politics is kind of like art.
That is like such an interesting way to think about it that I had
Yeah,
never considered before. But the more you speak, the more it makes sense.
and that's the whole point of like my video I'm trying to make. It's like yes, of course, a painting is art, and a painting and politics aren't very similar, but in some ways they are.
Yeah,
Because and how they're made, they're identical, you know? Um,
yeah, because I guess if art can be political, why can't politics be art?
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that's a really good way to think about it. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, yeah. And also you just have like art like political cartoons too, so
Precisely, yeah.
kind of so is there a bit of information you would like to or a bit of advice you would like to give anybody in your similar situation?
I would say my only advice is to not be afraid to experiment. I feel like
Uh-huh.
sometimes people put themselves in this box and that they're like, okay, lots of artists have a niche, like they're good at studio, or they're good at painting, or they're good at sculptures, or they're good at cinematography. And they
Yeah.
kind of like stop themselves from exploring all these other media because they're like,
Mhm.
I'm not as good or as experienced in these other forms. But you don't ever really find yourself or get into a place you want to be without finding out what places you don't want to be or what places you could be. And so I think it's extremely important to not be afraid to, I don't know, experiment. Yeah.
That's a good piece of advice. It's a bit different than some of the advice that I've had on here. So,
Mhm.
well, I want to thank you for being on. I really appreciate it. And I say this to everybody, if you know anybody who's, kind of like you, who's creative minded, and who would possibly like to be on the podcast, you let them know they already have an invite. All they have to do is message me. Because again, I
Um,
am free range. Anybody can be on this podcast. I really do not care. Um,
Be the
because
breeze.
because this is just me getting to meet different people, and I have enjoyed every episode that I've recorded so far. So,
No.
again, thank you for being on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you
Thank
for
you guys for
having me.
listening. If you want to see some some of the content that Ina's produced, you can check out the description, whether you're watching on YouTube or you're listening to this on podcast. So you can just check the description. There'll be Instagram links there, so definitely go check them out. Definitely go follow. And yeah, thank you guys for listening. Have a great day.